living and the old folks wished him well.
Some stars step onto the stage with pride in their eyes, but John Travolta, he simply turned around and the world couldn't look away. What makes people remember him isn't just the iconic dance moves, it's the way he came back when no one expected it. The way he lives in quiet luxury without needing to prove a thing, and the way he carried losses that could break anyone and still stood tall. While most of us wake at 4 a.m., worried about missing a flight. Standing in long security lines, John Travolta walks out to his front porch, opens the door to his own Boeing 707, and takes off. He's been through it all, abandoned by Hollywood after box office flops, surrounded by tabloid rumors, and shattered by the loss of both his son and the woman he loved for nearly 3 decades. But instead of crumbling, he chose to live differently, quietly, independently, and entirely on his own terms. And maybe it's from that distance, from the place where he stepped away from the spotlight, that people finally began to see him in a different light. If you enjoy stories like this, please give this video a like, it truly helps us. And don't forget to leave a comment below. In a crowded house where no one truly listened, John Travolta was nearly forgotten. But then a small stage, a single glance, and one teacher's quiet remark would take him farther from the streets of Inglewood than anyone ever imagined. In Inglewood, John grew up in a home just big enough to fit 8 people under one roof. Personal space was a luxury. 1 bathroom, a few worn pieces of furniture, and the soft hum of the evening radio were the only things that ever carried him beyond reality. In that working-class neighborhood, dreams didn't have much room to grow, but somehow, within those cramped walls, a spark ignited a spark that would one day light up movie screens around the world. At school, John was teased for his Irish-Italian last name and his different looks. At home, his older siblings were louder, bolder, more noticed. He was the quiet one, often overlooked, rarely heard. He wasn't athletic. He didn't crave attention, but he had a gaze that always seemed to stretch past the edge of town. And sometimes, that's the first sign of a person about to break away from what's familiar, to create something no one else sees coming. Only his mother, Helen, believed that art could change a life. A former singer with the Sunshine Sisters, she turned their modest living room into a stage, a yellow bulb for a spotlight, an old curtain for a backdrop, and the radio playing softly in the background. This was the first world John ever truly felt he belonged to. By the age of 5, he would sit for hours watching his mother transform into different characters. Who could have guessed that the same boy would one day move millions, make them laugh, cry, and believe with just the raise of an eyebrow? At 12, John stood backstage at a school play. His heart was pounding. Doubts swirled. What if he failed in front of the whole class? But when the spotlight hit, he poured everything he had into the role. After the final applause, a teacher approached him quietly and said, "You have real talent." It wasn't just encouragement, it was a key to a door no one in his family had ever dared to open. But stepping through that door would mean facing bigger challenges than he'd ever known, because glory always comes at a price. The question was, would John Travolta be brave enough to pay it? Think back to the 1970s, neon lights glowing, disco music pulsing through every street corner. In that world of glitter and rhythm, a young man with a worn-out suitcase and an oversized dream arrived in New York. John Travolta was placing a bold bet. But would it pay off? In 1971, at just 17, John left Inglewood with $200 in his pocket. He had nothing but hope and a dream he couldn't quite put into words. New York wasn't kind to newcomers, it was harsh, cold, and indifferent to nameless faces beneath the dim glow of Times Square. He stood in line for 6 hours at casting calls, only to be dismissed with a quick shake of the head. He took odd jobs cleaning theaters, delivering pizzas, saving every penny just to stay afloat. And on cold nights, as the wind crept through the cracks of his tiny apartment window, he'd ask himself, "What's keeping me going in this place?" One winter night, John stood in the rain, clutching his 10th rejection letter. The streets shimmered with slick reflections, and the streetlights cast a lonely glow across his face. Maybe I don't belong here, he thought, but in that moment, he saw his mother's face, the woman who once turned their living room into a stage and believed her youngest son had something special. Could that belief alone be enough to change everything? America, at that time, was changing too. The 70s ushered in bell-bottoms, strobe-lit discos, and Motown dreams. As Bee Gees filled the airwaves, John began stepping into the spotlight. Then, in 1975, his first break came the role of Vinnie Barbarino in Welcome Back, Kotter. With feathered hair, unbuttoned shirts, and a mischievous grin, John lit up television screens across the country. But it was 1977 that defined destiny. Saturday Night Fever changed everything, as Tony Manero, a Brooklyn kid chasing escape on the dance floor. John trained relentlessly, hours of disco rehearsals, sweat-soaked shirts, and disciplined routines. Every spin, every glide beneath the spotlight was carved from sheer will. That white suit, slicked back hair, and Bee Gees soundtrack would go on to define an entire era. He wasn't just starring in a film, he was giving voice to a generation. But behind the curtain, something else was unfolding. While the world watched him dance, John didn't yet know that his girlfriend, actress Diana Hyland, was quietly battling breast cancer. Their love was deep, sincere, and defied the age gap between them. They believed time was on their side, but not long after. She passed away in his arms. No headlines, no outcry, just a silence too deep to fill. After the funeral, John returned to set, eyes still red, voice a shade lower. Each dance move, each line delivered, was a silent promise to the woman he lost. He didn't speak of it, he just worked harder than ever. And in that moment, with the world cheering, one question remained. Could the spotlight ever hide the heartbreak he carried inside? Fame brings wealth, but John Travolta didn't choose castles. He didn't choose parties. He chose something no one expected: a private airstrip, a Boeing on the lawn, and a lifestyle that could only be called unreal. After the height of Grease and Saturday Night Fever, his career stalled, but in 1994, Quentin Tarantino handed him a second chance, Pulp Fiction. As Vincent Vega, the long-haired hitman with a dance to remember, John stunned the world. That quirky twist to You Never Can Tell didn't just entertain it, reignited his career and earned him a second Oscar nomination. Then came Get Shorty, which won him a Golden Globe. Then Face Off with Nicolas Cage, part action film, part psychological masterwork. By the late 90s, he was earning up to $20 million a film. He wasn't just a box office draw, he was a cultural monument. But instead of soaking in the after-party lights, John created a life apart from the noise. In Ocala, Florida, he built something few could imagine: Jumbo Lair Aviation Estates, a community where each home has its own runway. And John wasn't just a resident, he was once co-owner of the land. His home there is like nowhere else, mid-century modern, expansive and sleek, with a 7,500-foot runway stretching out from his front door, while others wait in TSA lines. John steps onto his porch, climbs into his Boeing 707, and takes off. That plane isn't a toy, it's a companion, restored with walnut wood, suede seats, and a Qantas logo in tribute. He even has an internal aviation communication system in his house. That's why people call him Captain Travolta. Before Ocala, there was Brentwood, his Los Angeles estate with a private theater and gardens. Kelly Preston tended herself. He sold it for $18 million in 2020. But for John, it was priceless. It was the place where Ella danced in the living room, and Kelly planted flowers outside the kitchen window. Later came Calabasas, a quieter home, each room filled with memory lavender Kelly had chosen, books she loved, a garden for Benjamin to play in. It's where Christmases were spent, where bike lessons happened, and where life became simple again off camera. For others, a house is an asset. For John, it's a chapter silent, sacred, and deeply personal. His cars reflect that, too. A black Ford Thunderbird from the 50s, a silver Rolls-Royce Phantom, a discreet Jaguar XJ6, not for show, but for legacy. Each car a reflection of time and taste.
But what truly defines him is the sky.
He's more than a pilot. He lives for flight. He's owned Gulfstreams, Learjets, and a Challenger. Once, he flew cross-country just to attend a friend's birthday party, then flew back the same night. For John, distance never mattered, just purpose. He also rides motorcycles, Harley-Davidsons. Old, worn, real. He's been offered luxury yachts, but he always declines. He doesn't need to show off. He just needs peace. And while others spend fortunes chasing visibility, John seeks what most overlook: quiet. In the peak of fame, he stayed home, mornings with jazz, paperbacks, and sunlight through vintage windows. Pressed shirts, Italian leather shoes, classic suits, a look not loud but exact. He's a fine cook. He prepares dinner himself: roast chicken, fresh salad, a glass of wine. No chef, no staff, just a man in his kitchen, surrounded by the laughter of his kids. Family vacations were never about fame. They were about mountains, lakes, or quiet islands. He was the pilot, the storyteller, and the father. Because behind every suit, every dance, and every plane, John Travolta has always been a family man. Kelly Preston, his wife, his partner. His light was by his side for nearly 30 years. They met filming The Experts in 1987. He told his friends, "She's the one." They married quietly in Paris in 1991. She wasn't just his wife, she was the soul of his home. They had 3 children: Jet, Ella Blue, and Benjamin. At home, John wasn't a movie star. He was the dad who drove Ella to school, stood backstage at ballet recitals, and read stories to Benjamin every night. "I knew fame," he said once, "but I only felt alive when I became a father." Jet had autism and severe health issues. John and Kelly fought for him for years with every therapy, every doctor. They never saw it as a burden. "You don't need to shine like me," John once told him. "You just need to know you're the most important thing in my life." When Jet passed away at 16, it nearly broke the family, but Kelly and Ella helped him rise again. And in the years that followed, he grew quieter, more private, more rooted. Dinners at home, family trips, a man at the grill, listening to his daughter sing. In love, he didn't seek perfection, he built something lasting, and no matter where he lands, his family is where he always returns. Even after the premiere, even after a long night flight across the stars, Hollywood can give you the spotlight, but it's also the place where some wounds never heal. For John Travolta, the greatest challenges didn't come from the roles he played, but from the losses no script could ever prepare him for. In 2009, the world seemed to pause when John and Kelly lost their eldest son, Jet Travolta, at just 16 years old. He passed away after a severe seizure during a family vacation in the Bahamas. To John, Jet wasn't just a son, he was a journey of love, sacrifice, and hope. His death left a wound that never closed, but even more painful was watching that grief become tabloid fodder. During the funeral, a blackmail scheme targeted the Travolta family, attempting to exploit Jet's medical records. A legal storm erupted right as they were burying their child. While the public speculated, John stayed silent. In those darkest days, he didn't speak at press conferences. He simply stood behind his wife and daughter, holding their hands tightly as they faced the cameras, like a man doing his best to keep the last beam of the house standing after the storm. In that moment, he wasn't an actor. He wasn't a pilot. He was just a father trying to survive unimaginable loss. Before that, John's career had already hit some turbulence in the 1980s. After the explosive success of Grease, a string of box office flops like Two of a Kind and Perfect shook his standing. Studio heads questioned whether the heartthrob with the charming grin still had the draw. But John didn't chase trends. He followed his instincts, and when Pulp Fiction came calling, he was ready. But the real test hadn't yet arrived.
In 2000, he poured his heart into Battlefield Earth, a passion project based on the novel by L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. A belief John had followed for years. The film was panned by critics, labeled one of the worst flops of all time. John didn't argue. In a quiet interview, he simply smiled and said, "I made that movie for myself. That's enough." Then came the biggest headline. In 2012, he was accused of sexual misconduct by an anonymous male masseur. The case was quickly dismissed, citing lack of evidence and a withdrawn complaint. But the headlines didn't stop. Once again, John Travolta's name was everywhere, not for a role, but for a question no one could definitively answer. He didn't make a public defense. He just kept working, kept flying, kept walking beside his children as if silence was the only way to preserve his humanity in a world too crowded with noise. And then, in 2020, the blow that changed everything. Kelly Preston, the woman he called his light, passed away after a quiet, 2-year battle with breast cancer. She was his wife for 29 years. This time, John walked away from Hollywood. He stepped back from every film offer, choosing instead to be home, to be present. You didn't see him on red carpets, but you saw him at Ella's concerts, by the playground where Benjamin learned to ride a bike, and in those private, unrecorded moments of life that mattered most. Through it all, John didn't crumble. He founded the Jet Travolta Foundation, supporting organizations that help children with special needs, and every time he speaks publicly now, he doesn't talk about what he's lost. He simply says, "I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere." When the lights dim and the screen fades to black, what will people remember about John Travolta? A handsome face, a disco dance, or something far deeper than film, a man who lived with loyalty and quiet resilience. With more than 82 roles across 5 decades, 2 Oscar nominations, and a Golden Globe win, John Travolta has touched nearly every genre musical, action, drama, comedy, from Tony Manero lighting up the Brooklyn dance floor to Vincent Vega navigating the surreal world of Pulp Fiction. He wasn't just an actor, he was a living current in American pop culture. But his greatest legacy doesn't live on the big screen. It lives in how he moved forward after every loss, how he chose grace over bitterness, and how he used his fame to quietly do good, from founding the Jet Travolta Foundation to his gentle return in recent projects, to the unwavering presence he maintained as a father, a husband, and a life partner. He became something rare, a celebrity who never lost himself in the spotlight. In 2023, he surprised audiences with a Super Bowl commercial. Revisiting the Summer Nights dance alongside his daughter Ella, the hair may be thinner, but the eyes still carried that same spark of quiet joy, as if to say, "I'm still here, and yes, I'm still dancing." At 71, John Travolta no longer needs to prove anything to the world. He's already done more than that boy from Inglewood ever dreamed. But instead of ending his journey with a final statement, he leaves us with an open question, a gentle reminder for anyone who's ever doubted themselves. What dream in your heart has yet to be lived? From a cramped little home in New Jersey to a private runway where the sky belongs to him alone, John Travolta's journey is proof that willpower, love, and endurance can rewrite any fate. If you've ever loved his dancing, been moved by a performance, or found hope in how he rose after heartbreak, leave us a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue exploring the lives of those who helped define an era. Live fully, and if you can, dream far.